True innovation is something that you definitely don't see too often in our space. Pretty much all releases kind of follow the same few rules that are set in stone in order to actually succeed in the market. Many of them share similar types of shapes. The vast majority of the enthusiast segment also goes for high polling rates. Some of them try to go for some really good skates, but at the end of the day, if the shape doesn't suit you, that mouse is either gonna collect dust or you're gonna sell it. An issue that a lot of enthusiast people in our mouse community have is that they have well over 10 mice because they keep buying new ones just to find that one shape that suits them perfectly. And this might finally be the mouse to actually solve that issue. But before we get further into it, I do need to let you know a few things before we start this preview. And yes, I'm calling this a preview because this is not a final release unit whatsoever. A lot of people seem to think that this is some new miraculous thing that will be the endgame mouse for all of us, but please do keep in mind that this mouse does not yet exist as a final product. They have tons of test pilots for this mouse, so we have had so many people in the aiming and also the mouse community, and with all of that input, they are definitely able to make one hell of a mouse. This is a 3D printed resin mouse, but it does actually work since it has a proper PCB within it that they're also currently testing out with this unit. Obviously, this was sent out to me directly by Orbital. I have been talking to them for almost half a year already. They have been working on this project for a very long time. The people behind Orbital are truly passionate about this thing. They really are trying their best to come up with something truly unique and something special for our community. I also want to mention that I will be giving away this Gamescom exclusive Pulsar gaming mouse right here. This one is incredibly rare because you could only win it by entering the Kovacs competition over at the Gamescom this year at the Pulsar booth and also winning that challenge as well, which I have done. And this one will be for you. It is an X2H mini, so keep watching this video so that you can find out how to win this thing. Starting with the not so boring stuff, we'll get into the unboxing experience first. You will obviously get two boxes. One of them will be your mouse, and the other box will include all the shapes that the Founders Edition comes with. Inside of the box, you will get two pairs of skates. They are equivalent to the Jades and also the Obsidians from X-Ray Pad, since they're being produced by the same manufacturer as well. Then you will get the core of the mouse, which will look something like this. It has a slot for the left side, the side buttons, the back hump, and also the right side as well. The base mouse itself is incredibly thin to accommodate for all types of widths that you can do with the shape parts. And thanks to the feedback of yours truly, the base will also be flat to accommodate for any types of mouse skates. You also get a USB-A to USB-C cable, and then you'll get your high polling rate dongle as well. Keep in mind that this really is under development and this could very much look different when it actually releases. Since the firm and also software is still under development for this mouse, I was only able to use 1K on it. And since it's that far from final, I will simply not be talking about the performance in this video. The weight of this 3D printed resin model is around 60 to 65 grams depending on which parts you actually use. But yet again, since the 3D printed resin is that dense, you simply cannot compare this to what the final unit will actually be like. I'll throw some numbers here on the screen so that you can see what the final weight will kind of be like, depending on if you're actually using no shape parts at all or using all the biggest shape parts. For the next box, this is actually where you'll find all your shape parts. You also get a clear oversight of all the shape parts that are actually available within the box. And then you also get a thin and a thick spacer for both sides, which means that you can either use a side piece with no spacers, only a thin spacer, only a thick spacer, or both spacers. And this works for both sides, obviously, so you have such a wide range to actually swap between widths. And depending on how wide you actually want your mouse to be, you also have different heights of side buttons to swap between. Now you might think back humps and side pieces is all there is to this mouse. But not only do you have spacers for the side pieces, but you also have spacers for the back hump. So you can pick either a flatter shaped hump or a claw grip hump, and then you have these two spacers to play with. There's yet again a thin spacer and a thicker spacer, and this will either increase or decrease the distance from the center of the mouse to the rear hump. So here, yet again, you can either use the rear hump directly onto the mouse without any spacers so that it is as short as possible, or you put the thin spacer to get a bit more space. You can also use the thick spacer to get even further back with the rear hump, or you can use both of them to actually get the hump as far back as possible. What this means is that you can actually create some pretty silly shapes that are like super long but also super thin. And thanks to this modularity, I was actually able to find a shape that worked really well for me with my 19x10 hands. Most of the mice that we have in the game here that are pretty thin are also usually quite short. Take for example the Lamsu Maya. This mouse is the perfect width for me personally, but not only do my fingers hurt due to the tapered sides, it is also very short. I can barely play this thing with an aggressive claw grip and my fingers absolutely edging the mouse button up here. And with a system like this, you can simply shift the placement of this hump to where you want it to be. With the modularity on this thing, you really can create shapes that simply do not exist on the market. And what I love about it is that I can finally make a mouse that is quite long so that I no longer need to edge that mouse one button over here, while still having a width that is not too wide. Whilst these shape pieces on the left side are kind of boring, with only small things to play around with like this latch design here, where you can kind of use your thumb to support the entire mouse, you can get really creative over on the right side of the mouse. Whilst most of these designs don't really work for me personally, since when I do my aggressive claw grip, my two fingers are completely together, the very best thing is that the 3D design of these prongs will absolutely be free to use and download for the community in the future. So you will be able to make your own side parts completely from scratch. I do actually have a Bambu Lab P1S 3D printer, and with normal PLA filament, you can definitely print parts that are precise enough to use with this mouse. Of course, it would be a higher quality with a resin print, but you can get really creative with this thing, and this really will be peak modding when this releases. No mouse out there will ever be as custom as this, except for this Play-Doh mouse. So if you at all care about customizability in a mouse, this will definitely be something you need to look out for when it actually comes out. In terms of the coating, these parts are actually all coated with what they will be most likely using for the final mouse. We are still giving feedback on this, and I was one of the guys to definitely push for a good grippy coating for the average user. And so far, I actually really did like the coating that they have used in this part, since it is definitely grippy without your hands needing to be super warm to grip the mouse. When it comes to high polling rate and the battery performance and all that stuff, I simply will not talk about it in this video, since they're so far from actually finalizing those things. I do, however, want to mention that they will be going for arm-on opticals as the default switch, but you will be able to go to mechanical switches in the final product. Here are also some sneak peeks of the software that they're currently working on. It seems to have anything that one would wish for. The skates that they have gone for are basically equivalent to X-Ray Pad Jades and also Obsidians, because you get both of them inside of the packaging on the mouse. Obviously, they're absolutely phenomenal, and the base will also be flat on the final unit, so that you can go for any skates that you'd want to. You can also go for either corner style skates or this larger area skate by putting in this middle piece as well. And if you decide on picking one up when it actually releases, and you want the same configuration as I use for my 19x10 aggressive claw grip, I use a thin spacer on the left side with the average part, which is basically the most normal or most safe one. Then I use the thick spacer over here on the right side with the right side part that is called the pinch. I personally like it a lot because the way that I grip my mouse, my fingers are over here towards the front, and when I grip like that over here on the right side, nothing is in the way for me, and I also get a bit closer to the center of the mouse. And the rear hump is a bit of a funny story. Normally I'm a big fan of more claw focused shapes, just like the Sora V2 or the OP1W for example, but I still ended up going for the flattest shape part, which is called the low hump. Back in a super early meeting that I had together with ORBITAL, I actually told them that they needed to make a shape part for the rear hump that is as flat as possible for those who really like the final mouse type of shapes. But what I didn't know is that I would actually prefer this one over all the other parts. And then I also do use the thick spacer in the back in order to make the mouse overall a bit longer. So it ends up creating this shape that is quite long but also not too wide. You also do have a rear hump part that is insanely aggressive, like even more aggressive than an X2H. Then you have the medium hump, which is quite a normal aggressive claw grip shape. And then you also have this funny shape piece, which is meant for right hand people. Me personally, I hated this, but I know that other test pilots absolutely love this rear hump part because then it actually makes your mouse asymmetrical. And what I mean by that is that this will never be an ergo since it isn't tilted, but you will be able to make it asymmetrical by using, well, a tilted rear hump. And now to my opinion about the ORBITAL Pathfinder. I simply can't tell you much right now, since this is just an early test pilot that is 3D printed with resin. What that means is that this mouse is definitely creaky, it's not really light, and it's not the most enjoyable thing to use right now in this state. However, when they have all their molds for all the ABS parts, and when they actually have a mouse that is final and doesn't creak, because it is actually made with molded ABS parts that have super tight tolerances, this mouse could be freaking phenomenal. But in this state, I simply cannot tell you to place that pre-order or not. That is completely up to you to decide. All I will say is that Orbital themselves are phenomenal guys. They are super enthusiastic, and I have never in my life seen a company care this much and be this close together with the community for feedback. I will say that I am very impressed by the actual mechanism, since it really does work, and when you actually play with it, you don't feel anything crazy moving around or parts falling out or anything like that. Once the parts are in, they're in and they don't move. I do think that this could absolutely succeed when they have their final product, but until then, I'm just gonna pray that they're gonna get enough pre-orders to actually get this thing produced, because holy shit, they are gonna have to buy so many molds. As some other people have already said, this might be the first forever mouse, since they are planning on putting out upgraded parts for the mouse in the future, so that you can either swap out PCBs when anything crazy comes out in the future, you can get new shape packs to actually upgrade your mouse and try out new shapes, and for all the things that you could possibly do with everything that they have in mind and that they want to bring to life. I do think that the price of $189 for the Founders Edition is absolutely justified. So if you do want to fund an awesome project, go ahead, do it if you want so, but please do keep in mind you're kind of going into this one blind. You're not going into it like Tense Mouse blind, because you actually see the shape of the mouse and you know sort of what you're getting, but you're still pre-ordering something that isn't even produced yet. However, me as an enthusiast, if I weren't a reviewer right now, I would definitely pre-order it, just because it is a project with so much passion behind it and almost solely targets our community. But until this thing starts shipping in half a year, thank you so much for sending this one out. Thank you so much to Orbital and all the awesome people behind it for having me be a part of this journey. And also just thank you for listening to my feedback. I have never seen a company listen to feedback that much and instantly making adjustments for these different types of test pilots that we've had. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck, Orbital, and thank you all for watching. Definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell right next to it if you at all enjoy any peripheral videos. And before we end the video, I do want to mention that you will be able to win this mouse over on my Discord server Pericord. The giveaway will be announced here within the upcoming week, and anybody as a member of Pericord will be able to enter the giveaway and the giveaway channel that we have there. So stay tuned over there if you want to get a chance of winning this thing. And until then, I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out.